you ever look back on something you said or did maybe yesterday, maybe years ago, and just get that wince? That feeling of, oh, if only I knew then what I know now. Of course you have. We all have. But what if we've been looking at that feeling all wrong? What if regret isn't the end of the story, but the very first page?
And that's really the big question we're diving into here. We're going to try to completely reframe this idea of repentance, to move it away from a story about guilt and shame and see it for what it could be, a powerful path to waking up moment by moment. See, this definition changes everything. Repentance isn't about beating yourself up for what you did, it's about timing. It's all about closing that gap between when you do something and when you become aware of what you've done. It's about learning to awaken sooner.
This journey, this shift from hindsight to foresight, it's a kind of pilgrimage, really, and it happens in stages. It's about refining our awareness, moving from feeling that sting of remorse about the past to finding clarity in the present, and eventually, even seeing a harmful impulse before it ever becomes an action.
So let's start at the beginning, where pretty much all of us live. Stage 1 is all about awakening after the fact. This is that classic moment when awareness finally dawns on you, but, well, the storm has already passed.
You've already said the harsh word. You've already acted out of selfishness. And then, in the quiet that follows, you hear the echo of your own actions, and you wince. Now, this isn't failure. This is the first faint light of your conscience starting to break through the clouds. You know, the 8th century Buddhist master Śāntideva totally got this. He saw this stage as an act of powerful honesty, not self-hatred. When you can actually name the mistake, when you confess it, even just to yourself, you bring it into the light, and that's what weakens its grip on you. If you hide it, it just grows stronger in the dark. So the practice here, it really does take courage. It's about facing what's true, even when it's uncomfortable, naming the error to loosen its hold, and then turning that light of awareness back onto yourself. It might feel like simple remorse, but what's really happening here is the very first glimmer of wisdom. It's the start of everything. Okay, so from there, we progress. Stage 2 is about awakening during the act itself. And this is a huge leap forward. Awareness is no longer showing up late to the party. It's right there in the middle of the action. This is that moment where you feel the anger rising, but you catch it mid-sentence. You notice that feeling of pride starting to swell up, and you soften before it totally spills out. You're catching the spark before it becomes a wildfire. You might still mess up, sure, but now there's a part of you that's watching, and it's alert, and it's present. The 13th century Zen master Dōgen just nails the practice for this stage. He boils it down to its absolute essence. It's this simple. Seeing it and letting it go is repentance. That's it. The act of pure, non-judgmental seeing is the practice. So practically, it's kind of like a 3-step dance. First, you just notice the thought or the emotion coming up. Second, you make a conscious choice not to chase it down the rabbit hole. And third, you just let the awareness itself, that simple act of noticing, be the release. You don't have to do anything else. And all of that practice leads us here, to the third and most subtle stage, awakening before. This is where that constant vigilance transforms into something else, something more like effortless, spontaneous clarity. Just imagine your awareness becoming so quick, so immediate, that the very moment a negative impulse even begins to form in your mind, it's met with light, and it just dissolves. It never even gets the chance to become a word or an action. The 13th century Japanese monk Nichiren gave us this absolutely beautiful way to think about it. He said our awareness becomes like the morning sun. In any potential offense, like a selfish thought or a flicker of jealousy, it's just like a delicate frost that simply vanishes in that light. So you can see there's a fundamental shift that happens in our guiding question. We move from that regretful, backward-looking question, what have I done? To this radically present and curious question, what is arising now? Repentance is no longer a reaction to the past. It becomes a state of continuous presence. All right, let's pull these 3 stages together and look at the whole journey, because they aren't really separate, disconnected places. They're part of a single, flowing, interconnected path of growth. You can think of it as this arc, where our primary teacher actually evolves over time. In the beginning, it's pain that teaches us, through sorrow and remorse. Then, in the middle, awareness itself becomes the teacher, showing us restraint. And finally, in maturity,
wisdom teaches us through a sense of freedom. This table really crystallizes the whole journey. You can see how everything shifts. We start with a feeling of hindsight and remorse, asking, what have I done? Then we move to a feeling of vigilance and restraint, asking, what am I doing? And finally, we arrive at presence and clarity, where the only question that matters is, what is arising now? That's the whole progression. It's a movement from guilt to grace. Because ultimately, this whole process isn't about rejecting ourselves or trying to become flawless. It's about learning how to turn compassion inward. It's the way our own wisdom gently takes care of the parts of us that are still learning, still growing, still trying to wake up.
And Nichiren leaves us with this final, beautiful image to think of our mind as a mirror. This practice isn't about scolding the dust that settles on it. It's about gently, consistently polishing that mirror with our awareness until it shines so brightly that nothing can really stick to it. Nothing can obscure its natural clarity.
So, as we close this out, the whole journey becomes personal. The goal isn't to be perfect, but just to get closer, to shrink that gap between what we do and when we see. So the only real question left is this: where is your next opportunity to awaken? Just a little bit sooner.